$3 billion. That is the estimated annual value of narcotics smuggled across the Pacific highways, fueling one of the most dangerous shadow wars of our time. But what happens when a single operation tears open that network and exposes the cartel's so-called invincible route? At 3:18 in the morning, in the vast and hostile waters of the Eastern Pacific, United States Coast Guard sensors picked up an anomaly. A small, sleek vessel known as a go-fast was moving at nearly 80 kilometers per hour, far beyond the speed of any normal fishing boat. Within minutes, drones confirmed the heat signature, and the game was on. This was not just another chase on the ocean. This was a tactical clash between modern naval power and cartel ingenuity, a collision of strategy, speed, and survival. On one side, a network worth billions, protected by ruthless gunmen and clever smuggling tactics. On the other, America's armed guardians of the sea, deploying helicopters, radar, and rapid response boats in a high-stakes pursuit. What makes this story even more gripping is not only the firepower unleashed, but the lessons it reveals about maritime strategy, military technology, and the evolving war between nations and cartels. Every move, every maneuver was a test of endurance and precision. Stay with me until the end, because every detail of this operation will challenge what you thought you knew about naval power, drug cartels, and the future of maritime warfare. And if you enjoy content that uncovers hidden battles, real tactics, and the truth behind military power, don't forget to hit like and subscribe right now. This is a story you don't want to miss. Imagine a stretch of ocean so vital to organized crime that it has earned the nickname the Narco Highway. Stretching from the Pacific coast of Colombia up towards Central America, it is the beating artery of the cartels. For decades, billions of dollars worth of cocaine has flowed along this hidden superhighway, often faster than governments could intercept. Now picture this. In the dead of night, a go-fast boat barely 12 meters long, but built for speed tears across the waves at nearly 80 kilometers per hour. On radar, it looks like a ghost, a flicker of heat against the black canvas of the ocean. But for the Coast Guard crew aboard the cutter Hamilton, that signal was a flashing red alarm. They knew exactly what it meant. Here's where the story gets fascinating for me. These boats are not just fast. They are symbols of how cartels think in military terms. They study tides, currents, and patrol schedules almost like naval commanders. The Narco Highway isn't just smuggling, it's strategy, logistics, and risk management on a global scale. And on that night, the United States wasn't just chasing criminals, it was waging a tactical battle for control of the sea. I can't help but think how this moment echoes history. In the Second World War, Allied navies fought desperately to close the Atlantic against German U-boats. Here, decades later, America is once again trying to choke off a lifeline, only this time it's not oil or steel, but narcotics. It's a different enemy, but the same principle. Cut the artery, and you weaken the body. That is why this single interception mattered so much. Breaking the Narco Highway, even for one night, sent shockwaves through cartel networks from Tumaco in Colombia all the way up to Mexico. To me, it showed that naval power is not just about war between nations. It is also about protecting society from the silent wars waged in the shadows. And if the detection of that go-fast was the spark, what followed was the fire. Helicopters lifting off the deck, rapid boats surging forward, and a clash where speed met strategy. This is where the story truly explodes into action. When people hear the words Coast Guard, they often picture search and rescue operations or patrol boats close to shore. But out in the Eastern Pacific, the United States Coast Guard looks very different. On that night, the centerpiece of the operation was the cutter Hamilton, a floating fortress more than 120 meters long, equipped with radar systems capable of tracking a small heat signature from miles away. To me, it feels less like a Coast Guard vessel and more like a warship, because in reality, that's exactly how it operates in these high-risk missions. The Hamilton carries not only heavy radar and long-range sensors, but also a fleet of rapid response boats. These small RIBs, or rigid inflatable boats, are the sharp edge of the spear. When the Go Fast appears, it's these craft that slice through the waves, closing the distance in seconds. And here's the part I find most compelling: technology only works if it is paired with courage. Imagine standing on one of those RIBs at 3 o'clock in the morning, the spray of seawater blinding you, while racing head-on toward armed smugglers. It is not just hardware, it's human resolve. Above them, the MH-65 Dolphin helicopter roared into the sky. I've always admired this aircraft because it's like having eyes of a hawk in the dark. Its infrared sensors cut through the night, its loudspeakers deliver warnings, and when needed, its gunners can fire warning shots to disable engines without sinking the vessel. That balance between overwhelming firepower and precise control is what makes the Coast Guard unique. They aren't there to destroy, they're there to capture, to bring criminals and evidence back intact. And let's not forget the invisible partner in this fight: unmanned drones orbiting thousands of meters above, feeding live data back to the command center. Without drones, the Hamilton would be chasing shadows. With them, every movement of the Go Fast became a traceable line across the sea. To me, this combination of cutter, helicopter, rapid boats, and drones shows how the United States blends old-school seamanship with cutting-edge technology. Now, why does this matter? Because not every nation has this kind of layered defense. I've seen how smaller countries in the region, Costa Rica for example, struggle with patrol boats that lack the sensors or range to chase a Go Fast. That means the United States isn't just fighting its own war, it's covering the gaps for an entire region. In a way, this is soft power and hard power combined, protecting neighbors while projecting strength. So when the Go Fast darted across the radar, the Hamilton was already in position, like a spider in its web. The stage was set. Technology, courage, and strategy were about to collide with Cartel speed and firepower. And that brings us to the most dangerous moment of the night, the chase itself. If the Hamilton was a fortress, the Go Fast was a dagger short, sharp, and built for speed. These boats are rarely longer than 12 meters, but they are designed to skim across the waves at nearly 90 kilometers per hour. Out there on the open Pacific, speed is its own kind of armor. The faster you move, the harder you are to track, the harder you are to intercept, and for a moment, the ocean becomes your shield. What fascinates me is how these vessels reflect the mindset of the cartels. They are not warships in the traditional sense, but they are tactical tools. Their hulls are stripped down to be as light as possible, their engines pushed to the limit, sometimes 4 powerful outboards mounted on the stern. And here's something I find incredible: they often carry just enough fuel to make the run, with hidden barrels on deck, because every extra liter slows them down. It's a brutal equation: speed above safety, speed above comfort, because on the narco highway, only the fastest survive. But speed alone isn't the whole story. Cartel crews have perfected evasive maneuvers, zigzags, sharp turns, sudden stops that throw off radar and force pursuing boats to react. And then there's the trick I always find chilling: dumping cargo overboard. Those shrink-wrapped bales of cocaine are designed to float, marked by hidden beacons, or picked up later by fishing vessels in on the scheme. To the smugglers, every package is disposable bait. Throw it away to buy a few extra minutes of freedom. Of course, Go Fasts are not unarmed. Crews often carry pistols, sometimes even mounted PKM machine guns fixed to the stern. It might sound crude compared to the firepower of a Coast Guard cutter, but at close range, that kind of weapon can pin down a boarding team. And with desperation on their side, smugglers can be unpredictable, reckless, even suicidal. That makes every interception not just a chase, but a potential firefight. When I think about it, these boats remind me of guerrilla fighters in history. They can't win a conventional war, so they rely on speed, surprise, and the hope of slipping through the cracks. In a way, every Go Fast is a small lesson in asymmetrical warfare, the weak using mobility to challenge the strong. But speed has its limits. Engines overheat, fuel runs low, and no matter how fast you are, once a helicopter has you in its sights, the ocean suddenly feels very small. That's exactly what happened that night. The Go Fast pushed its engines, dodged, dumped cargo, even fired shots, but the net was already closing. And what followed was the kind of clash that tested not just speed, but sheer determination. The moment the Go Fast ignored warnings, the night erupted into motion. From the deck of the Hamilton, 2 rapid response boats slammed down into the waves, engines roaring like thunder across the dark water. Overhead, the MH-65 Dolphin helicopter tilted its nose forward, its spotlight cutting a white path through the Black Sea. What had been a quiet blip on a radar screen was now a full-speed clash, and the clock was ticking. I try to picture what it felt like for those boarding teams. 12 men, strapped into helmets and body armor, gripping rifles slick with sea spray, knowing the smugglers ahead were desperate and armed. This wasn't theory, it was combat on shifting waves, where a single mistake could flip a boat or cost a life. It makes me realize how much discipline and training it takes to act under that kind of pressure. The Go Fast swerved violently, its engines screaming, tossing bales of cocaine into the ocean like breadcrumbs. Each splash was both a distraction and a loss, the cartel's classic tactic to buy time. Then came the real danger, flashes from the stern. A smuggler had pulled out a rifle, firing blind into the night. For a few seconds, the firefight was real. Bullets cracking over the water, the Coast Guard forced to split formation. That's when the helicopter played its hand. The door gunner leaned out, the thump of his weapon sending warning rounds into the water just ahead of the Go Fast's bow. It was a message written in fire: stop or be stopped. And when the smugglers pressed on, the response was surgical. A gunner on one of the RIBs aimed low, squeezing off bursts that chewed through the Go Fast's outboard engines. In seconds, smoke and sparks erupted, and the boat spun helplessly in the current. To me, this was the most cinematic moment of all, the raw courage of the boarding team slamming alongside the crippled vessel, rubber hulls smashing against fiberglass as 5 operators vaulted over the bow. What happened next was chaos in close quarters. One smuggler swinging a knife, another trying to shove a bale overboard until they were wrestled down and pinned to the deck. It was fast, violent, but controlled the mark of men trained to act without hesitation. And here's the part I can't shake. This wasn't just about seizing a boat. It was about proving that speed and desperation could never outmatch preparation and resolve. In that instant, the cartel's dagger had been blunted. But as powerful as that victory felt, the night wasn't over. From the darkness to the south, new engines began to roar, reinforcements were on the way. Once the smugglers were restrained and the Go Fast drifted silent on the waves, the real discovery began. To the untrained eye, the boat looked empty, just fiberglass, fuel tanks, and a few scattered tools. But seasoned Coast Guard operators know that nothing on a cartel boat is ever what it seems. A sharp clang rang out as a boarding officer's knuckles rapped against the deck. Hollow, that sound sent a ripple of anticipation through the team. Using hydraulic cutters, they peeled back the false panels one by one, and then, like opening a vault, the secret revealed itself. Inside were tightly wrapped bales, stacked row after row, each one vacuum sealed, coated in plastic, and hidden beneath a thin layer of plywood. Under the harsh beam of a flashlight, the contents shimmered, faintly white. It was cocaine, hundreds upon hundreds of kilograms. I have to pause here, because the scale always shocks me. By the time they finished counting, nearly 2 metric tons of cocaine were piled on deck. Imagine the streets of American cities if that shipment had made it through. We are not talking about one night of profit, we are talking about billions of dollars in poisoned lives. That realization for me is what turns this from just a tactical victory into something far more human. Every bale seized is one less tragedy waiting in a neighborhood. And it wasn't only drugs. Tucked beneath the seats were pistols, a folding knife, and most intriguingly, a waterproof cell phone. On its encrypted memory, investigators later uncovered coordinates, coded messages, and proof of rendezvous points near Costa Rica. In other words, this was more than contraband, it was intelligence. To me, this is where the real fight is won. guns and drugs can be destroyed, but information cracks open the entire network. What makes this even more compelling is the procedure itself. Each package was photographed with GPS coordinates, sealed with numbered tags, and logged on video by helmet cameras. Some might see that as bureaucracy, but I see it as ammunition of another kind, the legal firepower needed to make the case ironclad in court. Cartels can deny ownership, but they cannot deny a chain of custody recorded down to the last second. By the end, the deck of the Go Fast looked less like a smuggler's vessel and more like a floating evidence locker, and yet the night was far from calm. For the Coast Guard, seizing drugs is only the beginning. The greater danger lies in bringing that cargo home, knowing the cartel might be waiting. On the surface, the seizure of a few tons of cocaine might sound like just another bust, but in reality, this was a strike against the very lifeline of the cartel. Nearly 2,300 kilograms of cocaine, valued at over $500 million, vanished from their network in a single night. For any organization, losing $500 million overnight is catastrophic. For a cartel that runs on cash and reputation, it is almost unthinkable. What I find most telling is how quickly these losses ripple through their system. Imagine you are a middleman in Colombia who just invested in a shipment, only to hear that the entire load has been captured. Do you trust the network again? Do you send more money forward? Doubt spreads faster than any patrol boat. In the underworld, reputation is currency, and this operation shredded the cartel's credibility. Strategically, the United States accomplished something far larger than a single arrest. By breaching what was considered the narco highway, the cartel's most reliable Pacific route, they forced the enemy to adapt. That adaptation comes at a cost. To avoid detection, smugglers will now have to push their routes farther offshore, sometimes by 100 or even 150 kilometers. That means rougher seas, higher fuel consumption, and fewer options for emergency resupply. Each extra mile is another roll of the dice, another chance for storms or mechanical failure to end the mission before it even reaches the coast. History gives us perspective here. In the Second World War, Allied navies didn't defeat German U-boats by sinking every submarine. They won by forcing the enemy into riskier waters, stretching their supply lines until they cracked. I see a direct parallel on the Pacific today. The Coast Guard doesn't need to catch every Go Fast. It only needs to make the route so dangerous, so costly, that the cartels start losing more than they can replace. And then there's the psychological toll. After a failure of this scale, cartel leaders turn inward, suspicious of leaks and betrayal. Was it bad luck? Was it intelligence fed to the Americans? Should they punish their own men? That paranoia tears at the seams of the organization. I believe that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not the bullet, but the seed of mistrust planted in the enemy's mind.
What strikes me most is this. Every bale of cocaine seized is more than just a financial hit, it is a statement of power.
It tells the world that the ocean, once a highway for drugs, can be turned into a battlefield where law and order still holds the upper hand. But the battle is not only on the waves. The real victory or failure often comes later inside courtrooms, treaties, and alliances. And that leads us to the final piece of this story, the legal lessons and tactical takeaways that ensure one night's success becomes a lasting blow. What happened that night in the Pacific was more than a chase, more than a firefight, more than a seizure. It was a demonstration of how wars in our modern world are fought on multiple fronts, tactically at sea, and legally on land. From a tactical standpoint, the lesson is crystal clear. Against cartels armed with speed and raw aggression, the United States must respond with layers of technology, teamwork, and discipline. A cutter alone cannot do the job, neither can a single helicopter or drone. But when all of these are brought together, steel on the water, eyes in the sky, courage on the deck, the advantage becomes overwhelming. For me, that reinforces a truth that echoes across history. Victory rarely comes from one weapon, but from the harmony of many. Yet the other half of the battle happens far from the waves, in places much quieter, courtrooms. Cartel lawyers have built careers out of breaking chains of custody, questioning every photograph, every timestamp, every seized package. That is why the Coast Guard's meticulous process bagging, sealing, GPS tagging, video recording is not paperwork, it is firepower. It is what ensures that when the case is brought before a judge, there are no cracks for the cartel to slip through. To me, that discipline in evidence handling is every bit as impressive as firing a disabling shot in the dark. Both are weapons, both are necessary. And there is still the future to think about. Cartels adapt quickly. Tomorrow it may not be go-fast boats, but semi-submersibles, drones, or even autonomous vessels. The fight will evolve. But so will the defenders. Already, research into underwater sensors and AI-driven predictions of ocean currents is underway. Each advance is another net closing in, another reminder that the ocean is no longer a safe highway for traffickers. When I step back and reflect, what strikes me most is the human side. Every kilogram of cocaine seized is not just a statistic. It is one less chance for a family to be torn apart, one less tragedy on a street corner, one less life destroyed by addiction. That is what gives meaning to the risk these men and women take in the middle of the night on a black and endless ocean. And so, while the operation ended with smugglers in handcuffs and bales stacked on deck, the war itself goes on. The cartels will not stop. Neither will the Coast Guard, nor the Navy, nor the countless people who stand between the cartels and our communities. The fight is not over, but it is a fight worth waging. If you found this story as gripping as I did, and if you believe more people should understand the hidden battles that shape our world, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell. Stay with us, because the next story may reveal an even more dangerous frontier in the war at sea.